Hi, so the first section of this unit on data is about frequency tables, and this is where we're given raw data and we need to group it. And the important things for us to remember are when we're given continuous data are things we measure, so it's things like height, weight. They can be measured against a scale, so things like height and weight can be measured against a scale and they're continuous. When we group them, we need to make sure that we group them in data of equal class widths, and we use an inequality to represent each class interval. So we're going to have a look at how we do that. So I'm given here 15 students' heights. So I'm going to have a look and see what the lowest height is. The lowest height here is 153 centimetres, so that's my lowest. My tallest height here is 181 centimetres. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group them into 150 to 160, 160 to 170, 170 to 180, and 180 and above. But the problem that I have with that is that if I'm on, say, 160, am I in the 150 to 160 class interval, or am I in the 160 to 170 class interval? And what we're going to do is we're going to use an inequality to express that. So let's think about our first class width. So the first class width, I'm going to say the height is anything which is bigger than or equal to. See this little equal sign I've got here? This means bigger than or equal to 150 centimetres. So 150 itself would go into this width. It goes up to, but doesn't include 160. So notice I've got an equal sign here. Those two lines together are an equal sign with my 150, but I don't have one with 160. My next class interval is going to be from 160, and it includes 160, but doesn't include 170. And then I've got exactly the same for 170 to 180, and 180 to 190. And the reason why I do that is because it makes absolutely sure that I know 170, for example, goes in this class interval and not in this one. So there are my 4 class intervals. And normally, if it doesn't tell you how many intervals to make, somewhere between 4 and 6 tends to be a good way to summarise my data. So I now need to do a tally chart here, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to work out which interval each of my readings goes into. Well, I'm going to start with 153, and it's in the first interval. 156 is also in the interval greater than or equal to 150 but less than 160. 181 is going to be down here. 172, 158, 172, 157, 160, notice 160 goes into the second class interval, not the first. 165, 170 goes into that third class interval. 159, now here I've got my 5th tally, so I do it as my gate. 160, 160, 162, again I've got a gate now in the second one, and 158 in the last. That gives me my tally, and my last thing I need to do is write out the frequency. Here I've got 6 tally marks, so I've got 6, 5, 3 and 1. And this now summarises the data that I had above. I'm just going to finish that off by drawing it in my table and making sure I've got that properly labelled. So that's my class intervals, and I'm just going to draw a line now around that table. It's always a good idea once you've finished doing this just to check that you've got all of your measurements there. So if I add up my frequency, 6 plus 5 is 11, plus 3 is 14, plus 1 is 15, and I had 15 items of data to begin with, so I can make sure that I've accounted for all items of data. Okay, can you take a minute please to make sure you've got that worked example copied down? Once you've done that, make sure you play the video and you can move on to some questions for you to do yourselves. Okay, there's only 2 questions for you to do in this exercise. The first is around interpreting this table here, which tells you the number of children each woman has got. So for example, here you've got 8 women who had 0 children. You had 22 women who had 1 child. You need to work out how many women were asked, how many children did the women have in total, and what is the most common number of children for the women to have. For question 2, I'm asking you to do a frequency table like we did in the worked example. I've given you the length of some garden slugs. They're given in centimetres. I've completed for you the first class interval. I would like you to make sure you've got accurate second and third class intervals here. Fill in a tally table and work out the frequency. Okay, please pause the video now while you attempt that. Okay, we're going to have a look at some solutions here. So for the first question, how many women were asked? Well, these are the number of women who were asked, so if I add them all up in total, I get 50. Now, part B is a bit more complicated. We've got 8 women who had no children. That's 0 children. We had 22 women who had 1 child. That's 22 children. We had 15 women who had 2 children. That's another 30 children. We had 3 women with 3 children. That's 9 children. And we had 4 women with 2 children, which is 8 children. We add them all together. 22 plus 30 is 52. Plus 9 is 61, plus 8 tells me they had 69 children in total. What is the most common number of children for a woman to have? The answer is there were 22 women who had 1 child, so the answer is to only have 1 child. Okay, make sure we tick those off if we got those correct. For question 2, we just need to continue our class intervals. There, the width is 2 centimetres from 12 to 14, so the next one's going to have to go from 14 to 16. Making sure we've got our inequality symbols correct. The length goes from 16 to 18. The length goes from 18 up to 20. And my longest slug is 20 centimetres, so I'm going to need to do another one which goes up from 20 up to 22. Okay, and we're going to start doing our tally. So 13.2 goes into the first one, 16 goes into the third group, 18.5 into the fourth group, 12 goes into the first group, 16.2 into the second, into the third, sorry, 15 into the second, 19.4 into the fourth, 20 into that last group, 15, 19.8, 14 goes into that second group, be careful because it's on the cusp, 16.3 goes into the third group, 14 goes into the second group again, 17 goes into the third group, and 12.5 goes into the first group. So I should have a total frequency of 3, 4, 4, 3, and 1. If I check that, I've got 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 4 is 11, plus 3 is 14, plus 1 is 15. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 items of data. So that looks as though I have it correct. Give yourself 1 tick if you've got the class intervals correct, another tick for the tally, and a final tick for the frequency. Please make sure you correct your work now. Give yourself a mark out of 6, and if you need any further assistance on this topic, please look at Hegarty clips number 402 and 403. Well done.